So I've known Adam. I think we met in 2004 when I began working at the Historical Society of Frankfurt. So that's going on 18 years. Adam is the foremost expert on Philadelphia waterways. As I mentioned, he's been the historical consultant to the Philadelphia Water Department for I don't know how many years, maybe 20 or more. And he's his website Philly H2O is just a wealth of information, and he lectures on the topic very frequently. All the creeks and waterways throughout the Philadelphia County, and then of course all the sewers and channeled creeks are within his purview. So there is no more knowledgeable person to speak about Philadelphia waterways than Adam Levine, and so tonight he's going to focus on the sad story of the Frankford Creek. So take it away, Adam.
Thank you, Jack. Can everybody hear me? Or can Jack and yes, okay.
I can't hear you.
I always get a little intimidated by that introduction, the world's expert, but it's a pretty I guess it's a pretty small pond to be a big fish in, so, or a pretty small sewer or whatever you want to look at it. But going over, I started, Frankford Creek was one of the first creeks I started researching when I began working for the water department back in 1998, actually. So it's been almost 24 years this spring that I'll have been working as a consultant to them. And I created a talk in 2002. There's been a lot of material on my website, phillyh2o.org, but I haven't given this talk for about 9 years. And so I went back into it, and a lot of it looked a little dated. So I tried to go into the pictures that I've been downloading lately and new resources that I have. And this is just a disclaimer saying that I was working on this, and other people who've heard me talk, I've used this excuse before, and then everything turns out fine. But I just want to say that I was working on this until 6:45. So I'm hoping everything's in the right order. I'm hoping I remember what I want to say. But so don't if those of you who want to know what this picture is behind the title can here we are. This is sort of a bucolic look at Frankford Creek from 1898. Although even in the 1890s and as early as the 1840s, on the 1849 DRIPS map, which I'll show in a second, there were 30 mills upstream of the borough of Frankford. Many of them on the Wingahocken Creek at that point, but also up the Tacony Creek and other tributaries such as the Little Tacony Creek. There were 30 factories. So this might look like a nice place to play and the kids are wading in the water, but it's all just a matter of I guess just we can't smell it, we can't really see it. We just think it looks pretty, but it probably was polluted even in this picture. So I want to start with this series of slides that I start many of my talks with, because it's relevant here, and it always is illuminating, I think, to people who've never seen this set of maps. And this is the new streams map that the water department has created. We began creating a historic streams map of streams that once all the streams that once flowed in the city back in 1998, and it's become more and more elaborate as I've done more and more research, and as just digitization and scanning and imaging software has gotten more and more sophisticated. The original of this map is like 500 megabytes. So it was the kind of thing that you couldn't have done in 1998, but now we can have this very detailed map. For those of you who know the Ellet map from 1843, many of these streamlines are based on the Ellet map. The names I've gotten from various maps, the Ellet map, the Smedley map, and other places, just other reports, wherever I can find the stream name, I'll I'll put it on here. So this is the historic streams map. This is what the streams once looked like in Philadelphia. And this is all that's left. So I'm just getting ahead of myself here. It always shocks me to see how much is missing from this map. If you can see my cursor here, the Wingahocken Creek is completely gone. Rock Run is completely gone. Little Tacony Creek is completely gone. And that's just, and even the little creeks up in the upper part of the Frankford Creek watershed, these little Rock Creek and Sawmill Creek, which had little tributaries that went into Philadelphia before they went out into Montgomery County up above, they were put into sewers. So this is what's gone. It represents, and that's just this one watershed. Sandy Run, which maybe some of you heard me talk about Sandy Run, I think a year ago or so to this group, that's all gone from this map too. And then all the Center City streams, many of the Delaware River tributaries, and most of the streams in West Philadelphia. So the only streams to survive are the ones in Northeast Philadelphia, and that's because that area was developed late enough that the city realized and engineers realized that it was cheaper to buy the land as parks, such as Pennypack Park and the park along Wooden Bridge Run, and just to buy up the stream valleys rather than to try to put a pipe in them and fill them in. So that's a 1-minute version of a talk that sometimes takes an hour. But I'm not going to be really talking about the sewers, this topic today, but I just wanted to show what happened to the what the water department for a while was calling the Tacony Frankford Creek watershed, which is a pretty awkward name and not really an accurate depiction of what a watershed is, because it's really the Frankford Creek watershed, because it's a Frankford Creek that's at the mouth of the whole system, and the Tacony Creek or Tacony Creek and the Wingahocken Creek are tributaries to the Frankford Creek. So this is the detailed map, and you can see that Little Tacony Creek also, it has its own tributaries: Tan Run, Dark Run, probably because it was running dark with some kind of pollution. Tan Run, I think, was coming by a tannery and receiving all the waste of the tannery, and other things. So the Frankford Creek watershed covers about 35 square miles in Philadelphia and Montgomery County, and with the major creeks that I've been mentioning, empties out into the Delaware River now in a different place from where it used to. As you can see now, it runs a straight line into the Delaware, and I'll be talking about how that was done and why it was done as we go along. Sorry if I don't want to make anybody dizzy. I'll try to just keep moving forward here. So here are the sewers. So here's another depiction. This is from an 1895 map where I've drawn the Rock Run and the Tacony Creek and the Wingahocken Creek. And you can see the confluence of the Wingahocken and the Tacony are at I and Ramona. You can still go down there and see that pipe, that outlet. And that's where the Frankford Creek begins, is where those two creeks come together to form a Frankford. Here's the map that I didn't want to transcribe that whole title block, the map of the township of Oxford. So I just put it up there as a picture of the Oxford boroughs, the township of Oxford and the boroughs of Frankford and Bridesburg, with parts of Bristol, Northern Liberties, and Cheltenham townships. 1849 map done by, I think it was Matthew Drips, who did a number of maps, most of which weren't printed, or if they were, there are only a few copies remaining. He also did maps of Byberry Township and of Roxborough and Germantown townships about the same time. Here you can see again the Tacony coming down to meet the Wingahocken and then forming the Frankford. And this is the map where, if you count up all the mills along the Tacony, the Frankford, and down down to the mouth of the Frankfurt. That's where we get the 30 mills from 1849 number. Just some details from this map. It's an amazing map. This is available on the Philadelphia Geohistory website, which I think I'll mention again. If you've never visited it, it's got an amazing amount of resources. If I have time at the end, I might run through a few slides showing you how to access some of those things. But here's Bridesburg at the mouth of the creek. Here in 1849 already is what became the Roman Haas plant at the mouth of the creek, and over to the above, a little bit upstream is the Frankfurt Arsenal. Here's a picture of the mouth of the creek. This is from the Bruce Connor postcard collection that's part of the collections of the Northeast Philadelphia History Network, showing looking upstream, showing the arsenal on the, I guess it's the arsenal on the right and the chemical works on the left. And here's a picture of some boathouses at the creek. And again, this looks like a very sort of bucolic, interesting place to live. And probably once the creek got out into the Delaware River, maybe the pollution of it was diluted. But by 1914, this creek was very polluted, and the Delaware River itself was very polluted. All the sewers emptying into Frankford Creek were just emptying raw sewage in. And all the sewers emptying into the Delaware, Schuylkill rivers and any of the waterways of the city were just emptying raw sewage. This was before sewage treatment. And just a picture of the boathouses along I think this the Delaware riverfront in Bridesburg. So in 1799, the Frankford Creek was declared navigable all the way up from the mouth up to Frankfurt Avenue for fairly small barges and other craft. And so that meant that all the bridges had to be movable to allow boats to pass under them. So on the top of this picture is the Oxford Street Bridge over Frankford Creek, and which is a swing bridge, a swivel bridge. And below it is the Bridge Street Bridge, which is a drawbridge where the two sides pull up. And I have so many pictures of all of these, all the aspects of the creek, the bridges, the creek itself, the reconstruction of it, the channeling of it. It was just frustrating today to try to get everything together. So there's a lot that, as with any topic, the more you delve into it, the more there is to find. So here, this is a little out of sequence, but here's the mouth of the three creeks, where the three creeks come together. The Frankfurt is flowing downstream to the right. The Tacony is straight ahead of us. And to the left is the Wingahocken Creek, or what's left of it. Most of it by 1916 had been already put into a sewer. And as I say here, and I offered to Fred today as I was going through all this material, and I realized that if I was going to talk about the Wingahocken Creek also and its whole history, that the talk was going to be twice as long. So I offered possibly in a year or so to come back and give a talk just on the Wingahocken Creek, which has a fascinating history, and there's all sorts of interesting pictures and information. But it was the largest creek that was put underground from starting in 1879, finishing up in 1928. So it took almost 50 years to wipe the Wingahocken Creek off the map. There's only a tiny piece of it, runs about a quarter mile in Aubrey Arboretum in Germantown. Wingahocken runs up to Mount Airy in Germantown and drains that whole area into the Frankford Creek. The Little Tacony Creek is another tributary that actually goes up Everett Street and up in that direction. This is a picture, and I think this is probably Lou Leskis's identification of this. I would have thought this was the Frankford Creek, but I guess it is too small, and it's not a drawbridge. It's not a movable bridge. So this probably is the Oxford Street over the Little Tacony Creek in 1901. And here's a picture of the Little Tacony Creek in 1849. You can see there's already a big print works, which meant they were dyeing and bleaching and printing fabric. So there's a long mill race from the mill pond over on the right, carrying the water into the plant. And then once it goes through that plant and does all the dyeing and bleaching, then they dump that wastewater into the Little Tacony, which then flows out into the Frankford. So this was just one of, as I said, 30. And by the turn of the century, the 20th century, there were probably 100 factories in the watershed, many of them in Germantown, which is drained by the Wingahocken. So just a little plug, or a little just interesting way I do my research, I guess. I was looking at a Google map a number of years ago, and I saw this weird street, this weird configuration of streets cutting across the grid. As most of you know, especially if you live in the city, the grid is more or less sacrosanct. Very few streets cut across the grid. And what I've learned over the years is the streets that do cut across the grid are usually following old stream beds. So I saw Everett Street here and then Cranford Avenue, and I said, well, this looks odd. What's going on here? And sure enough, there's a map. There's a interactive map viewer on the Philadelphia Geohistory website where you can overlay maps from different eras to see how things change. And sure enough, this was a branch of what they either called Little Tacony Creek, or in this map they call it Tackawanna Run. You can see that there was a stream there, and I could bore you and show you 7 overlays of this and all of that, but I won't. I just want to say that that's a really useful tool. I saw already a question in the chat. Did I ever have a stream running by my house? I think was one of the questions, and this is one way that you can do the research yourself. And here's what the neighborhood ended up looking like by 1942 on the land use map of the city. So Little Tacony Creek also had its industry. There was the Globe Dye Works building, a building that still exists. It's now I think it was, if it's not still, the headquarters of the I'm afraid I think they still call it the Tacony Frankford Watershed Partnership, which after I denigrated that name, but Julie, if you're listening, you can correct me in the chat, or you can chastise me for making fun of that name. But so there was this big Globe Dye Works. Again, what they're doing is dyeing fabric. And again, the wastewater is just going right into the creek. So there was all this pollution in the creek, and besides pollution, as with any waterway system, there's always erosion upstream, filling the channel downstream, and sometimes causing flooding, sometimes causing problems. One of the problems was this bridge, that bridged Frankford Creek, the 6-arch bridge, which you can see that it probably wouldn't take much to clog those arches and cause a big flood. So in 1901, the city began changing the channel of the creek by removing this bridge and by actually taking a bend out of the channel. This is part of an 1881 survey done by the Army Corps of Engineers. About 1884 is the last time the federal government, even though navigable highways are supposedly the responsibility of the federal government to maintain the navigability of them, to dredge them, and to keep them deep enough to be navigated. 1884 was about the last time that this Frankford Creek had any money spent on it by the federal government. This is part of a much larger plan that shows the entire creek in a survey showing where the plan was in 1881 to take out some of these bends. These are in the lower part of the creek, and to straighten out the channel and probably to dredge it. Well, the money was never spent. That was never done then, and it wasn't done until much later and in much more piecemeal fashion, and for the next 60 years until the night after World War II. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. straightening the channel was part of that 1881 plan. And you can see here on the left is the map showing the original channel, which sort of winds around. And you'll see in the photographs, in this area here is probably, it's hard to discern where the creek is actually flowing, and to actually give it a real channel, to give some protection to all of these factories here, factories from overflow, protect them from possible flooding. So here's before the revision of the channel, and here you can see it's hard to know where the creek is actually flowing. It's probably flowing in several different channels through this massive brush and debris. And so I think this was a city project. They began just carving out a new channel. This is the big tannery, a leather factory, probably using the creek water and then dumping their tan vats into the creek. There's another picture of the channel, new channel being built. And then here's more or less what the channel ended up looking like. And it didn't take long as development was continuing upstream, more houses were being built, more runoff was running into the stream and less was soaking into the ground, more impervious surface. More and more erosion was happening in the lower part of the creek. The supposedly navigable part was filling up. And in 1913, and I'm not going to read all of this to you, but I guess the city had requested that the federal government dredge the creek, and the report stated that the creek was in a deteriorated condition. There was hardly any at low tide. I should have mentioned at the beginning that the creek is actually tidal up to about Frankford Avenue, which is where the end of navigation was, when it was navigable. But by the time the 20th century came around, there was maybe at low tide there was only about a half foot of water in the upper part of the creek. So the government decided that it wasn't worth spending federal money on and these slides will be up when this talk goes up on the website of the, so you don't have to try to read all of this now. But they because the creek was so small and because it was mostly just local, they decided not to do anything and recommended that the city take care of it. And the city didn't want to do that. City actually thought they were being discriminated against by having to take care of their own creek. So in 1931, another survey was done, but that was the middle of the Depression. And again, the same straightening, the same channelization, the same dredging was recommended, but it wasn't done. So this is by 1934, this is what the creek started to look like. And there's a whole series of pictures that we have at the water department that we will eventually get up online that show the creek from more or less where it begins now in Juniata Park all the way down to the mouth, just section by section. And you can see how much silt and how much the channel is filled. And you can see also that these factories that are complaining about getting flooded out are actually not only built in the floodplain, they're built right into the creek channel itself. So it's a little bit unfair of these factory owners to complain when they're basically building into the creek, and so when the creek rises, they're going to get water in them. And as I point out in here in this caption, the creek is so shallow in its normal flow that the channel is so filled with silt that it's hardly even halfway up to the knees of these little boys. So there were, because of the upstream development and because of, I don't know whether the weather was weird in the 1920s and 30s, but there were a lot of floods through Frankfurt. And along the Wingahocking in the Logan neighborhood of the Wingahocking, along the where the Wingahocking Creek once flowed, the sewers were inadequate, and the Logan neighborhood flooded any number of times, to the depth of like 3 or 4 feet. So these floods were recurring, regularly, sometimes 2 or 3 times in a summer, and the mill owners wanted relief. And because they were factory owners, because they were wealthy, because they employed people, and because it was the Depression, they got the attention of the mayor. One of these letters, I forget which one. These are letters from the factory owners to the mayor, refers to the creek as this Frankfurt sewage canal, which is basically what it was at that point, because not only the factory waste, but all the sewage of the upstream neighborhoods was just going right into the creek. Besides, through Wingahocking Creek, a lot of sewage. There was one sewage treatment plant built in the 20s, and so there was probably less human sewage by this point going into the creek, but there was still a lot. All the industry was still draining into the creek. So the only thing to come out of this was a work progress administration project where the city, through the federal government, was able to hire 1,000 unemployed men to basically dig away this oxbow, which was down in the lower part of the creek, and straighten that out. That really wasn't going to change anything, but it did employ a lot of people, and probably did make some difference upstream, because the water certainly probably backed up as it made its way downstream from the left around this big bend, and then further down into the creek. So here's that oxbow from a 1930 aerial photograph, and the mouth of the creek is over on the right. And then in this photograph, you can see the circled area is where that oxbow was. The land still hasn't been redeveloped, but there's no bend there. The creek is now flowing straighter. And you can see that there was some channelization done of the creek even before the post-World War II major channelization. You can see the banks, the embankments along the creek, trying to keep it in. But the trouble with that, and the trouble with building in a floodplain, is that the water is either in bounds or it's out of bounds. Once it overflows, if you're in the floodplain, you're going to be flooded. There's no relief valve, so to speak, that you get from a true floodplain when you have an urban floodplain like this. So by 1934, you can barely float a rowboat up the creek at low tide, let alone any kind of navigation. And navigation essentially ended in the creek at the end of the 1920s. And part of that was due because the creek was filling up and silting up, but also because the railroads were providing a lot of the transportation of goods to the factories up and down the creek. So just some newspaper articles I found years ago about the pollution. These are from the bulletin collection at Temple University Library. Calling the creek purple and perfumed. And what perfume? Tomorrow the water may be pink or yellow depending on what particular kind of factory waste are dumped in, but the perfume is always just about the same. That is terrible. Excuse me. So here, this poor little boy, Erlens, fell into the creek, and his grandfather, I think it was, who was a physician, said that the boy would have lived if the creek hadn't been so polluted. Whether that's true or not, it's hard to say now, all these years later. But it's still just the kind of reputation that not just Frankford Creek, but most of the creeks in the city had. Cobb's Creek was the same. You can find stories about this, about the creeks, about the rivers, about everything. Everything was just so polluted that it was, became the joke of the nation in a way. So the idea of a navigable stream became a problem because the city wanted to do something about the flood problem on the creek, but they had no jurisdiction to do it because it was supposed to be the federal government doing it. So that's what this headline means, the lost child. It's sort of caught between the federal government refusing to do anything and the city either unwilling or unable because of the money that it would cost to do anything itself. So beginning with this hearing in 1938, the city worked out with the federal government to declare it a non-navigable stream, and that's what this report from 1940 is saying, that declare to be a non-navigable stream, and that way the jurisdiction goes back to the city, and the city can decide what to do with it and maintain it. Excuse me. And even in 1940, it's polluted with a high concentration of sewage and industrial waste. And its most important use is not navigation, it's to carry off the surface drainage, meaning all the stormwater that flows in the 35 square mile watershed. Anyway, so this is what happened. So in 1940, the city got jurisdiction back, but then because of our entry into World War II, no public works were done until after the war. But shortly after the war, the flood control problem on Frankford Creek was made a priority. And in 1947, this report, which you can download in full if you want from my website, from a copy I made from the city archives, was accepted by the city, and it began to be implemented in 1947. And the plan called for basically channelizing the creek from about Castor Avenue all the way down to the river, and not just channelizing it, but at this point about where Roxborough Street came in, and where the creek took a bend to the north and went out to the river through Bridesburg. The plan was to just dig a straight channel, a new channel straight down through the marshy area, and just let the creek just flow straight out. So basically, they're admitting that this is just a stormwater outlet for the watershed, and not really a living stream anymore. So they began implementing this plan. Here's with a cutoff channel in Juniata Park. The Juniata Park golf course actually is somewhere in this area, and the creek now goes straight from here to here, but it used to take a big loop under Wyoming Avenue, which is what this is. And so they had to build two bridges within about 1,000 feet of each other to cross this little tongue of creek, which is a prime example of the stupidity of sticking to the grid of streets, when if they had just bent that street a little bit, they could have completely avoided building those bridges. And they built the bridges several times before the city decided, well, we don't want the creek to go there. So that was the first part of the project that was done. This is one of the Wyoming Avenue bridges when the creek was still flowing under it in 1916. And I thank Lou Leskis for alerting me to this photograph, and many others that I wasn't able to use. So here's a picture of the channel of the creek. I think that might be the same bridge as they've made the cutoff, and they're filling in the channel. And this became part of the golf course. You can still walk out on the golf course, and you can see the two bridges that are still visible from the golf course, but they don't bridge anything anymore. And here this is looking up at the outlet of the Winkahocking sewer, which is the largest outfall, as the water department calls these things, of a sewer system in the city. It's 21 feet high and 24 feet across. And this is shortly after the cutoff was made, and showing the regrading and probably what we're looking at here is part of the new channel. I'm not exactly sure where the cutoff went and where they had to dig a new channel, but this is probably part of it. I don't think all this rubble and concrete is part of the original terrain there. It's probably landfill. And here's looking back up at toward the cutoff. And so that was done. And I have lots of pictures of that, but I'm going to have to sit down with somebody like Lou Leskis or someone who can really help me identify where they are, because there are lots of pictures showing bridges and channels. And I was looking at them today and I just couldn't figure out which way. And I figured rather than confuse the issue and show you all sorts of crazy things, the idea is, though, that this channel of the living stream was just filled in, and then a new channel was built. So this is the beginning of work further downstream of Castor Avenue. And this is the groundbreaking, or the stream breaking, I guess you can call it, ceremony. And the dignitaries from the city, probably the public works director, I think the mayor is actually pretending to man the steam shovel. And so this is May 12th, 1950. And the next few pictures show how quickly this work was accomplished, at least in this first section. So here's June 27th. You can see that they've diverted the creek around. They basically divided the creek in half so they can work on one half of the new concrete channel while the creek is still flowing in the other half. Here's some of the concrete going in. This is July. And so by August, the channel, they're finished. They have both halves, and you can see the water is now flowing in the right half of the new channel. And then by October, this section was done. This is just a small section of it. There's about 3 miles, I think, of stream from this point down to the Delaware River. So the work continued. One of the sections actually goes underneath Leeper Street. There's a section where it goes in this 3-barrel tunnel, which is, I think, what we're looking at. If someone wants to correct me, they can. I think that's one of the Bromley mills on the right. These pictures I like just because they show the old cars. I always love seeing old cars, and also how the factories literally are built right up into the stream channel. Here's the Harbison's Dairy, or at least one branch of it, showing excavation of this section of the creek. And part of the problem of navigability was also the fact that a lot of the factories had built low bridges, and a lot of the bridges were just too low to get under. I mean, at this point, this is above where it would have been navigable anyway, but there was just actually no way to get anything up the creek by the time they started doing this. So the final section, as I mentioned, was this cutoff channel, which went straight down to the river. And it's interesting how they did that. They didn't excavate the channel first and then build the bridges. They built the bridges on solid ground, or at least they excavated around the piers of the bridges, I guess, and then just built them. But they didn't try to excavate the whole channel and then bridge it. I'll show some pictures in a second, but a lot of this land that this channel was going through was basically a giant wasteland, a garbage dump. So if you've ever walked down along that channel, which I had the chance to do before you can walk underneath the Betsy Ross Bridge and alongside the channel. There was a lot of garbage seemed to just be littered all around the surface, and that's, I think, because this was a dump, and when they excavated it, they just threw the stuff up on the banks, to make the embankments. So and dumps always seem to be burning in Philadelphia. This was not just true of this dump, but all through South Philadelphia in this period. They were dumping fill to fill the lowlands down where the stadiums are now built. And they always seem to be on fire in the photographs. So here are these bridges showing that they built the bridge and then they excavated underneath and around them to get the channel that they wanted. You can see to the left of this bridge, there's, the channel has been dug, but to the right, they haven't excavated it yet. And so here's the channel down into the Delaware River, which has been cleared out, and you can see the water has already started to come up into the channel. And so 8 bites of the big shovel turned the path of Frankford Creek. And here's so they finally got the channel excavated, and they had this one final dam built. What you're looking at to the left, going up to the top, toward the top of the picture, is the old channel of Frankford Creek, and to the right is the new channel. So what the bulldozer is doing is cutting off the old channel, and the big steam shovel is digging out this dam so the water can now flow straight out to the Delaware River. And the old channel was then, here's the picture of the new channel shortly after it was completed. And this is what the old bed of the creek looked like, before it was filled in. And so the old bed of the creek up to, I think, about Bridge Street, or a little bit above Bridge Street, was filled in. Storm sewers were put in it. And I'm told that this is the caption for this in the city archives Philly history website said this is Most Holy Redeemer Church, which, as far as I can tell, doesn't exist anymore. Just a cemetery exists, but someone in the chat can fix and can elaborate on that if I'm wrong. And so they have to actually, since this was very low ground and swampy, they have to put pilings down to support the concrete sewer that they were building. And here's a section of the sewer built in the old creek bed. And then another section. And once the sewers are done, the channel will be filled in, and then those bridges can be taken away, I suppose. There's no need to have maintain a bridge anymore. And so, just to sort of sum up, I said the water, the creek was fairly compromised, even by the middle of the 19th century, by factory waste. But the development upstream, creating more and more runoff, and then more and more sewage going into the stream, and then more and more factories being built, just completely destroyed any natural integrity of the stream, any life that was in the stream. And that of course didn't keep little boys from swimming in it or wading in it, but it was really just as one of the letters to the mayor said in the 1930s, it was a sewage canal in that time period. But now it's really just a way to get stormwater quickly out of the city and into the river. And it's so, just to update this, I had to add the Google map. And you can see that you can almost still trace where the original bed of the creek was. And so this would have been where that big cutoff was, somewhere in here, and this is the current Google view from probably from sometime last year, and then the creek going up, and then cutting through what now is the golf course, but which used to take a bend there around Wyoming Avenue, and coming and then going up shortly after there up to the confluence of the Wingahockey Sewer and the Tacony Creek. So there's so much more I could have talked about. I encourage you all to go to the. I'm just going to do this just because I can. This is not. I'm a member of the Athenaeum of Philadelphia, which is the host of the Greater Philadelphia Geohistory Network, and also a shareholder of the organization. And I've used this website so much, I just wanted to share quickly some of the things that I think are valuable about it. So this is all the resources that are on that are easily found on the site, which include about 3,000 hexamer surveys, which are found under the industrial surveys. I think maybe I talk about that, but also the city directories are scanned and available through a link here. I think from 1795 to the 1870s. So there's a huge amount of information on this site. So these are the hexamer surveys, which if you click on the industrial survey link, you come this, and then I find it more useful to search the full index. You can just search this with a keyword search as if it's a website. This page will take a while to load, but it has almost 3,000 lines in it, 3,000 listings of different plans from the 1860s to the 1890s, early 20th century. And the detail in these is incredible. Where I showed the picture of the Globe Dye Works, that was one of the plans. They give all sorts of information about what the buildings were made of, how they look. They even sometimes have little pictures, little drawings of the buildings. There's also a link to Sanborn insurance maps on the site. And this is a project that I worked on, the streets department plans, which is a little hard to find, but if you click on number 3 on the banner of the homepage here, and then you click on this banner, you get to this index, which includes about 3,000 plans that I spent about 5 or 6 years over various not the only thing I was doing, but indexing and cataloging and arranging for the scanning of. These were from the city plans office of the street department and the various survey districts. So there's all sorts of ways to search this. If I put in Frankfurt, I get 178 different plans that have the word Frankfurt somewhere in the listing. Sometimes that's Frankfurt Avenue, sometimes that's Frankford Creek. Jim Duffins, who is an archivist at the University of Pennsylvania, created this amazing land ownership map from 1877, which is available through the geohistory site. This is what the entire map looks like. He's even gone outside the city and is now doing some neighboring townships. This has been a lifelong project for him. Years and years of research and mapping. But as you zoom in, you see it's broken up into the original townships that the city was divided into before it consolidated in 1854. And as you get closer, you see all these parcels are defined, and then you can actually click on the parcels and you get the information about who owned them, how big they are, what year they were acquired, and things like that. It's just a very useful tool to do research, at least. And this is supposedly the land ownership in 1777, and he is the expert and the go-to person for anybody who wants information about Philadelphia deeds, and he'll probably kill me for saying that, but that's the truth. And then if you go to the homepage of the Athenaeum and click on research, then you get the geohistory site, which, as I said, 7,500 maps and atlas plates, and that's not including the hexamer surveys, the city plans, and all the other things I just showed you. You get the Builder's Guide, which is 26,000 pages of over 54 years of real estate magazine that was published by the city. And then the Architects and Buildings um, website, Philadelphia Art, has 135,000 pictures, 4,000 architects, and 30,000 buildings described. That's the only part of the site that where you might have to get a password or something, but often you can get a guest password. So that little plug being done, I'll just go back to the my final slide here and see what kind of questions we have.
Well, thank you, Adam. As usual, you've just, it's an astounding amount of information, but it's kind of a sad story, as you note in your title, what happened to Frankford Creek. Before we get into all the questions in the chat, I had heard several years ago that there was a plan to restore large parts of Frankford Creek back to its natural state. Did that ever happen, or did that never get off the ground, or?
Well, I spoke to Rob Armstrong earlier today.
He's on the
Yeah, if Rob wants to unmute himself, maybe he can talk about the
yeah.
trail. I think the trail is what you maybe heard about, Jack. So
Oh, not the creek, just the trail along the creek.
yeah,
Yeah. So basically the trail project is in several phases. It's been under development and feasibility since I would say about 2011. We have two phases of it completed. The first phase was from Lewis Street, Lower Avenue, up Richmond, and then up Wheatsheaf. And the second phase is along the Adams Avenue connector. And the third phase, we have a grant in with PennDOT to do the third phase, which would go from where the Adams Avenue connector ends at Torresdale and Aramingo into the neighborhood, actually, past Wamrath Park, and then to Kensington. And then we're going to use Deal Street, which would get you to the cap that Adam mentioned. And then we'd be on the cap. As part of the development of the Greenway, we purchased land on Bristol Street, which was, you could actually see, excuse me, when Adam had the picture of the cap up. And that's going to be developed as a park. So I think, Jack, what you're referring to, the city, and then eventually it will wind up and get to Iron Ramona and get to right where the big outfall is, where the Wingahocking is that Adam mentioned. So it's multi-phase because it's expensive. And the feasibility study recommended a lot of different alignments where the city's basically choosing the path of last resistance and not acquiring, a whole lot of land. I'm trying to use rights of way that exist already. I would anticipate, if things go well and we continue to get funding from the infrastructure bill, that we could complete this, in the next 5 years, I would say. But the Bristol Street Park, right along the creek, which is adjacent, which is right near Leaper Street and the cap, that is under design development right now, actually. And we purchased that in, I think 2015, maybe. So.
Cool. That would be a trail along the creek, right?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't just follow the creek because of the rights. Like we said, we can't purchase all the land along the creek. It follows the general direction of the creek, but it connects to Coney Creek Park with the East Coast Greenway. So it connects, along the Delaware. So it connects the largest park to Wamrath Park, which is a historic park in Frankfurt, most of you probably know about, to the East Coast Greenway. But right now, we don't have a phase that's really in the neighborhoods. The next phase would really take it into the neighborhoods and onto the cap, and then into the new park that's under development.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Rob. Good to hear from you. So there are a number of questions. Some of them I'm not sure Adam can answer, but one, which probably not. Is there any hidden creeks or streams near my house, near Cotman and Jackson Street? I don't.
That's where I read that. That was came in before I even started talking, and I invite that person to contact me directly, and I can either, we can either talk about it or I can instruct, it's really easy to look at these map overlays on the geohistory website and see where the creeks were. It's not exact, but at least you would have some idea. If so, that I would just say that anybody who has questions like that, that's part of what the water department pays me to answer, is those kind of questions.
Okay. When and where were those presentations in Ben Salem? That's referring to Patty McCarthy's presentations. They were last week and then last month, I believe. You can contact the Ben Salem Historical Society to for I don't know if they've recorded them or not, but they're yeah. Can someone provide me with Facebook info? So that's for the friends or the network. If you just go to Facebook and type in Northeast Philadelphia History Network, in the search bar, you'll come to our Facebook page. And if you just follow the group, then you will get all the notifications that that we put out. The other way to stay in touch is through the email nephillyhistory@gmail.com. So
Be quiet, Dad is on the thing.
somebody please mute whoever you are. Is Oxford Street Oxford Avenue? Yeah, I believe that it's Oxford Avenue, but down in Frankfurt there, I think it might be called Oxford Street. Let's see what other questions. Harvey Cantor is saying you can still see where the loop went under the bridge on Wyoming Avenue. That's the the loop in the creek he was talking about. I know that they still have pretty bad flash floods on Tacony Creek. Is the golf course still there? I believe it is, right, Adam?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Let's see. Sorry, I'm scrolling. I grew up in Juniata Park near Castor Avenue and Bristol Street, and we had this creek down the bottom of Bristol Street. Deal Street in Frankfurt was on the other side of the creek. There were many mills back behind the creek in Frankfurt.
That probably would have been the original creek before I don't know how old this person is, but if it was before 1956 when she grew up, and then that would have been the original creek that was then put into a sewer.
I just want to say that I wrote that.
Okay.
And I grew up in Juniata Park, and that was at the bottom of the hill, and there was factories on the other side, and there was a Denai playground over there on Deal Street, and there was a lot of mills back in there, and so.
Yeah, it was a thriving community for a long time, the whole corridor. So.
Right.
Yeah, Frankfurt was a real sort of industrial powerhouse there in the 19th and early 20th century. Is that North Catholic High School in the background in the one picture? I believe it was. In that one picture, that was North Catholic. Julie Slavitt here. She's saying that Tacony Frankfurt hosts regular Tacony Creek Park tours as well as Frankfurt Greenway tours. So if you go to ttfwatershed.org, you can find more information on their tours and programs. What is the factory or dye works at G and Wyoming Avenue? I don't know if anybody can answer.
I could look it up, but if Tom Donnelly wants to email me that question or remind me, or if I write it down now and send me his email or something. You can access my email through the Philly H2O website. It's on every page of the website. So, feel free to send me any questions that way.
Okay. Somebody's commenting on the Harry Kyriakodis's book, Underground Philadelphia, about the canals and caves and tunnels and transit. Yeah, I mean, that doesn't really focus on the Frankfurt or Northeast area. That's mostly kind of the downtown area that focuses on, but it is a fascinating subject. Adam,
right. I'm the one that just said about Juniata. So yeah, I just bought the book. I saw it on. He was talking about it on Facebook, so it sounded so interesting. So,
yeah, he's given presentations to our group before as well.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Harvey Cantor, Adam, did you ever consider doing a presentation on the Aramingo Canal?
Well, just to tell people, I'm working on a book right now, which is going to talk about a lot of the Wingahawking, the Mill Creek, which I've been fascinated in for 30, 40 years, 30 or more years. The Aramingo Canal, I have a lot of research I've done, and I know they've done some interesting archaeology. It's also called Gunner's Run and then Hart Creek. There are various names of it, but there's some amazing pictures of it, of the headwaters of it before it became a canal and then a sewer, up in North Philadelphia. It's also the Cohoxing Creek. The next one I'll probably do a presentation on, as I said, is probably the Wingahawking Creek, because that's the one that I have the most information. It was the biggest creek that was put underground, but they're all interesting. They all have their stories. There's always, if you just go onto any newspaper database from the, even one that doesn't go all the way to the present, if you can find amazing stories, colorful stories, and where they describe the odors and the trash and the dead animals and the things that they find in the creek and the people living in them and living on them and fishing in them, and it's just all sorts of colorful stories that I'm trying to capture in this book that I'm working on. So I'm not going to do any more new presentations anyway, until I get the book done. But after that, I don't know what I'll end up doing. So.
Well, we'll keep having you back as often as you're willing to talk. Why were the streets, angled streets, built on top of the creeks?
You always want to have your sewer under a street. And so if you're going to put the creek in a sewer, and you can't make if the creek is too big to sort of follow the grid in a sewer, go left, right. Then if you just want to follow the valley, then that's why there's a street on top of that, is because the city wants to have access to the sewer and not have it under public property. It also becomes a problem if there's any work to be done. If it's under public property, you might have to tear a house down, or if the sewer collapses, which it did in West Philadelphia and about 60 years ago, people can die, if it's built underneath private houses, which this particular sewer was. So you'll have to read my book to learn more about that one, or go online and see any of the talks that I've given, and that are now online. All my secrets are out on the internet now. So.
Okay. Here's another one from Julie Slavitt saying, we also visit T14, the largest sewage outfall. I believe she's talking about the tours that the Tacony Frankford group does. We are working with Riverfront North to activate this new greenway. Julie, if you're on and you want to unmute yourself and mention any or elaborate on this a little bit, you're welcome to. Nope. Okay. All right. Very cool with trails. Would the newer outfall be somewhat navigable again?
Well, I'm not telling you what to do, but it would probably be navigable in the newer outfall. I mean, I think you mean the new mouth of the creek. If that's what you mean, it's not really, because first of all, there's nothing on it purposefully. It's just an embankment. And then fairly quickly you would get to bridges that would be too low to really get anything worthwhile underneath. So it's the whole redesign of the stream was not intended to keep it navigable. It was intended to carry away stormwater.
Okay. Here's a correction to something that I said incorrectly earlier. Oxford Street is not Oxford Avenue. I thought it was, but Oxford Street. Well, see, there's an Oxford Street in the maps that Adam was showing, and I think that Oxford Street might be, a continuation of Oxford Avenue. Anyway,
maybe it's called Avenue. I don't know. Maybe they changed the name to Avenue, and the city doesn't like to have two streets with the same name, so I'm curious about that one now. So
yeah,
Maybe one's avenue and one's street.
There's an Oxford Street in Fishtown. That's Oxford. That's that's different from the Oxford Avenue. But there was an Oxford Street, I think, in one of your maps.
Yeah,
which
but
is-
they could have changed that name to Avenue at some point.
Right, right, okay.
Can I say something on that?
Yeah,
There was an Oxford Street in Frankfurt, but that's now Kinsey Street.
Okay.
but
Thank you.
it is a continuation of the Oxford Avenue, right? Like it follows the same line, right, Alan? Whoop, we lost him.
Okay, here we go. No,
No?
Kinsey Street intersects Frankfurt Avenue. The closest thing to a continuation of Oxford Avenue South would be Paul Street.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for that clarification. So here's another question. The loop that was filled in on the lower Frankford Creek used to be a yacht club back in the day. Is that correct?
I never knew anything about that, and it seemed pretty industrial to me to be a yacht club, but I don't know how far back in the day you're going, so I can't say yes or no.
Okay. Somebody else commented, I remember Acme Manufacturing that was near Castor, nearby to the Juniata Golf Course Creek, which started my appreciation for the watersheds. Thanks for the information. Where did the creek originate and end exactly?
Well, I'm not sure where it originates exactly. The creek, Frankford Creek itself, begins at I and Ramona, where the Tacony and the Wingahocking come together. But where the Tacony, which is the larger of the two tributaries, where that would begin, I'm not sure. Somewhere in Montgomery County. The Wingahocking began at some springs in Mount Airy. A couple of different springs. There were two branches of the Wingahocking, but the creek ended at the Delaware River, basically between the Roman Haas plant and the arsenal, which is where there still is a little remnant of that original mouth that still is there.
The Tacony Creek originates somewhere up like where Holy Stuff Liquor Cemetery is.
Okay.
Because you can follow it all the way up to about, what the hell road is that? Up in the Glenside.
Okay.
Up Easton Road. You can follow it up until about Easton Road, and then it goes into those hills on the other side of Easton Road and starts up there someplace.
Okay.
Well, here, Julie Slavitz weighing in again. The Tacony headwaters are in Abington and Cheltenham.
Yeah, Cheltenham would be Holy Sepulchre. So.
Right. And then the same person asked, what was the creek originally called? It had a very kind of difficult Indian name, right, Adam?
Yeah, I haven't. I don't know.
Yeah, it's something with a Q. If you look on some of the older maps, it was a sort of an Anglicization of the Indian word that are. And it began with a Q. That was the name for Frankford Creek. All right. Well, that's the extent of the questions. Once again, thank you, Adam, for a great presentation. Well, anytime you want to come back and report on another creek, we'd love to have you, or sewer. If anybody has any final comments, pipe up. Otherwise, we'll bring the meeting to a close and hope you will join us next month, February 2nd, for Robert Purvis in Byberry, which is a fascinating story of the great African-American abolitionist that in Byberry in the 1840s through the 1870s. So, again, Happy New Year. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you next month.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.